Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're pulling back the curtain on a world that, for many of us, is really the stuff of thrilling fiction.
Absolutely. Spy novels, movies.
Right. But what if the reality was even more stark, maybe more brutal than anything we've imagined?
Mm.
What if, as one defector actually described it, the only way out was, well, through a crematorium chimney?
It's a truly chilling thought, isn't it? And it's exactly where we begin our exploration today.
Yeah.
That grim reality is precisely what we're going to unpack. Our source material for this deep dive is a really singular, unvarnished account, Inside the Aquarium, The Making of a Top Soviet Spy, by Victor Suvorov.
Okay. So this isn't academic theory.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This isn't some analysis from afar or
Yeah.
a secondhand report. It's a first-hand memoir from a man who lived it, a defector who offers these chilling, unfiltered insights into the GRU.
The GRU, remind us.
That's the Glavnoy Razvedivateloy Upravlenie. Think of it as the Soviet Union's super-secret military intelligence organization, often seen as the KGB's even more shadowy and, well, arguably more ruthless rival.
More ruthless than the KGB.
That's the reputation, certainly. And we'll be extracting the most important nuggets of knowledge and surprising, often pretty disturbing facts directly from Suvorov's unique perspective.
Okay, so our mission today is to take you deep inside that world. We're going to systematically unpack the rigorous training that broke men down just to build them anew.
Yeah, the philosophy behind it, too.
Exactly, the ruthless philosophy that justified, well, unimaginable actions and the intricate, brutal web of operations that defined a Soviet spy's life.
By the end of this deep dive, you should have a profound understanding of the sheer brutality and the psychological toll behind that espionage curtain.
Seeing the raw truth through Suvorov's eyes. Okay, let's unpack this. So let's begin right at the threshold of this labyrinthine organization, the GRU itself. It's known chillingly by its internal nickname, the Aquarium.
Yeah, the Aquarium.
And the very first, most fundamental rule you learned inside its, well, transparent yet impenetrable walls, according to Suvorov, was disturbingly simple, but absolutely absolute.
Right. It says, it's a ruble to get in, but 2 to get out.
A ruble in, 2 rubles out. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, that single phrase, it really encapsulates the entire unforgiving philosophy of the organization. A lot more difficult to get out of it isn't just, a figure of speech.
No.
It's basically a literal death sentence for anyone even thinking about leaving. Suvorov vividly details the only theoretical exit through the chimney of the crematorium.
The only way out.
That's what he claims was drilled into them. And this wasn't just a metaphor for, like, a disgraced end or professional oblivion. He recounts this truly visceral experience.
What was that?
A film shown to new recruits. It apparently depicted a defector being cremated alive.
Seriously? Alive?
That's the description. Now, whether this was real footage or some masterfully crafted piece of psychological warfare, who knows for sure. But its impact was undeniable.
I can imagine.
So whether your exit was deemed honorable, dying in service, or a shameful forced end, the final destination, the literal last stop, was meant to be a pile of ash.
Wow.
This stark, literal consequence for defection or failure really begs the question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What kind of absolute, unwavering loyalty does such a terrifying ultimate threat actually cultivate?
Is it even loyalty at that point, or just pure paralyzing fear?
That's the question. Exactly. It certainly doesn't leave much room for negotiation or, frankly, independent thought.
No. And this ties into a core, really crucial distinction Suvorov makes between the GRU and its, well, more public counterpart, the KGB.
Right. The KGB was much better known internationally and domestically.
Yeah, and he explains the KGB counts its voluntary workers in millions. People could theoretically approach them, apply, offer to be informants, that sort of thing.
But the GRU, Suvorov states it unequivocally, entirely secret, with no voluntary workers, period.
Meaning you don't find the GRU.
The GRU finds you, precisely. They operated on such an extreme level of concealment that any volunteer, anyone showing up trying to join, would be seen as an immediate, profound threat, not an asset.
So what would happen if someone did somehow find them and try to volunteer?
They wouldn't be welcomed in. Suvorov chillingly reveals they'd be immediately arrested, subjected to long and very painful interrogation.
Just for trying to join.
Absolutely. The core questions wouldn't even be about their loyalty initially. It would be, where have you heard those 3 letters mentioned? How have you managed to find us? But most important, who helped you? Who? Answer, you bastard.
God, that's intense.
And Suvorov grimly assures us, almost matter-of-factly, The GRU knows how to get the right answers out of people. They'll get an answer out of anybody. This isn't just about getting information. It's about maintaining control through absolute, paralyzing terror.
Utterly terrifying. It sounds almost medieval, that approach to internal security. He even recounts that chilling detail.
About the tongues.
Yeah, that the GRU knows how to rip such tongues out of anyone who oversteps the mark, talking about the organization, literally tearing them off, along with the heads.
Brutal imagery.
It drives home that the law of the aquarium wasn't just some catchy internal motto or a cautionary tale. It was a life or death decree permeating every level. Everything we talk about inside stays inside. Not a single word must go beyond the transparent walls.
And if we connect this to the broader psychological implications, this extreme, brutal secrecy isn't just about operational security in the, traditional sense.
It's deeper than that.
Oh yeah, it's a foundational element of deep psychological control. It cultivates this environment of absolute isolation and dependence within the organization itself.
Right, you're cut off.
Exactly. The knowledge that any breach, even an accidental one, carries such a brutal terminal penalty creates this powerful, almost self-policing mechanism among the members.
Loyalty born of fear again.
Absolutely. Born not purely of patriotism, maybe, but of a profound primal fear. It sets the stage for the kind of isolated, utterly controlled world Suvorov himself inhabits. It highlights the absolute loyalty and psychological conformity expected from anyone lucky, or perhaps unlucky, enough to get inside the aquarium.
So moving from those grim rules of entry and, well, non-exit, let's look at Suvorov's own improbable path into this secret world. It certainly wasn't through a normal recruitment drive.
No, definitely not.
He began his initial military career as a company commander in a tank unit. Pretty standard, right?
On the surface, yes. But this wasn't just any tank unit. He was specifically in a second company.
Okay, what's special about a second company?
Well, these units apparently had a second profession. They received additional specialized reconnaissance training beyond their main combat role.
Ah, so even then.
Even then, they were primarily fighting units, sure, but they could also carry out crucial reconnaissance missions for the battalion or regiment in tactical situations.
Interesting. And how did that compare to other companies?
Well, Suvorov contrasts these second companies with the more common third companies. Those were often understaffed, their equipment typically in mothballs, basically just holding units waiting for reservists in wartime.
So this subtle distinction, it suggests a system was already in place.
Exactly. It reveals an underlying, deliberate system for identifying and grooming potential recruits. The GRU wasn't looking for just standard soldiers. They were looking for those with an innate aptitude for intelligence work, even if the soldiers themselves didn't realize it yet.
And Suvorov's description of his own training maneuvers, his combat exercises, it's incredibly vivid, almost intoxicating the way he describes it.
He really conveys the raw energy.
Yeah, he talks about driving tanks straight into the heat of battle, being completely intoxicated by the deafening noise of the engines, the tracks, the poisonous smell of expended shells filling the air.
He seems to thrive on it.
Absolutely. He describes how he completely disregarded the cowardly transporter with the white flag, the vehicle for observers to escape if things got too hairy in the simulation.
Pushing the limits.
Totally. He pushed his company, with his own aggressive, almost reckless determination, to hit targets like a simulated missile battery capable of delivering, as he puts it, a couple of Hiroshimas.
Wow. He sounds like a real force of nature, a born leader in that kind of chaos.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. A truly illuminating moment in the GRU's unconventional recruitment strategy.
Okay.
Despite this stellar, even exceptional performance, his clear leadership, Suvorov recounts this scene where he's just curtly removed from command by Colonel Yermolayev, publicly disgraced, a total professional humiliation.
You'd expect a demotion, right?
Yeah.
Or at least a severe reprimand.
You would. But immediately after this public dismissal, a Lieutenant Colonel Kravtsov, who becomes his crucial mentor later on, reveals the true astonishing reason.
Which was?
He says he's being removed because a company is too little for you.
Too little. So it wasn't a punishment.
Not at all. He's then offered the position of Chief of Staff of the division's reconnaissance battalion, which is a truly massive, unprecedented jump for a senior lieutenant, a rank that normally wouldn't even be considered for that role.
Wow. Okay, that is unconventional. So this astonishing ascent, what does it really tell us about the GRU's unique, often brutal recruitment process?
Well, what it tells me quite clearly is that their system wasn't about performance in the traditional bureaucratic sense. It wasn't about rigidly following the military hierarchy.
No, it seems focused elsewhere.
Exactly. It was about raw, untapped potential. It was about an aggressive, results-oriented mindset, even if that mindset wasn't proven in a formal intelligence role yet.
Right, Kravtsov was building his team.
Yes, he explicitly stated he needed intelligent and capable men on whom I can depend. This immediately shows the system prioritized specific aptitudes, a certain ruthlessness, maybe, an innate initiative, a willingness to push boundaries over standard military rank and conventional career paths.
Like a talent scout for a very particular, very dangerous kind of predator, identifying those who possess the brutal instincts they valued most.
Precisely. And so Suvorov is swiftly brought deeper into the fold. His new posting is at the 13th Army Headquarters.
And this HQ wasn't just some bland office block.
No way. It was this sprawling mansion. But its history was, well, chilling. A real tapestry woven with violence and state control.
Tell us about it.
It had apparently previously been home to a wealthy man who was murdered. Then the notorious NKVD took it over.
The Soviet secret police, precursor to the KGB, known for the purges.
Exactly. Then, during World War II, the Gestapo used it, before finally becoming the Soviet military's intelligence hub, starkly named the White House. A pretty cynical nod to power, right?
Yeah, the layers of its dark history are almost symbolic of the GRU itself. Built on brutal foundations, shrouded in mystery, a testament to the cycles of power and repression.
And the security, as you'd expect, was formidable, almost paranoid.
What kind of details does he give?
Thick bushes hiding an impassable network of barbed wire. All the ground floor windows were just walled up ironwork and solid shutters on the first floor.
Wow, a fortress.
Totally. And what's particularly fascinating is the sheer scale and ingenuity of the hidden infrastructure Suvorov describes. Machine gun casemates connected to this whole network of underground tunnels.
Underground tunnels?
Yeah, a hidden underground command point protected by thousands of tons of concrete and steel, and then another, even more secret Spectre command point whose exact location was known only to an absolute handful of individuals.
A fortress within a fortress, designed for absolute control and impenetrability. It sounds like something out of a, I don't know, a chilling Gothic novel, almost a ghost story in its oppressive atmosphere.
Yeah. And the daily life inside this Fortress HQ reflected that pervasive atmosphere of secrecy and control. Staff officers working diligently during the day.
And then replaced by guards at night.
Right. Silent guards patrolling with dogs. The only sounds were the crunch of their boots, maybe an occasional bark. Suvorov works in the carefully guarded second department.
The nerve center.
Exactly, the nerve center for information processing. They'd meticulously analyze data from all sorts of sources, lower military units, district HQs, even snippets and reports from KGB frontier troops, piecing together this mosaic of intelligence.
And there was another group.
Yeah, the elusive fifth group, quietly handling the cutting-edge stuff, electronic reconnaissance, listening to the silent language of enemy signals.
So if we connect this to the broader picture, it demonstrates this complete, unyielding immersion into the world of Soviet intelligence. Even the seemingly mundane daily life inside these heavily fortified walls was just steeped in secrecy and subtle power dynamics.
Yeah, he even recounts these little, almost theatrical power plays, like his own "I'll poke your eyes out, you bastard" gesture to an adjutant in the corridor. Childish, maybe, but aggressive, a display of dominance.
And Kravtsov's reaction.
Dismissive. Kravtsov's attitude towards such petty quarrels is telling. He was focused on the bigger picture, the larger strategic goals. He saw squabbles like that as beneath his attention.
Which reveals how every interaction, every square foot of space, reinforced the strict hierarchical and ruthless nature of this environment. It truly immersed you in the physical and operational reality of Soviet military intelligence, showing how even the most ordinary activities were carefully orchestrated within a framework of absolute secrecy and control.
So from the physical labyrinth of the GRU, let's delve into its true philosophical core. Suvorov learns this directly from Kravtsov himself.
And not in some formal briefing room?
No, under the unlikely, almost romantic setting of a campfire under the stars. But the pronouncements were anything but casual or romantic. Kravtsov asserts, our world is very cruel. You can survive in it only by scrambling upwards.
That's pretty blunt.
Very. And what's truly fascinating here and quite disturbing is how Kravtsov just strips away any veneer of civility, any pretense of higher ideals.
He doesn't sugarcoat it.
Not at all. He frames existence not just as a bloody, uncompromising battle between two political systems, which was, a familiar Soviet refrain,
Right.
but also, and crucially, as a struggle between individuals. Which brings us to his brutal, unvarnished animal nature philosophy. We are all animals.
All animals.
That's what he argues. Kravtsov says that thinking humans only camouflage this primal nature with layers of societal norms morality. But when faced with the raw, existential question of survival, who lives, who dies, who triumphs, he claims they will, without hesitation, plunge our yellow fangs into the throat of our neighbor, brother, or mother.
Wow, that's a bleak view of humanity. Utterly cynical. It doesn't just inform their operation, it actively underpins their entire ruthless approach. It's a philosophy that basically justifies any action.
It's unsettlingly honest, isn't it? Almost nihilistic.
Yeah.
This take on human nature under extreme pressure, and this philosophy, this raw pragmatism, it directly impacts how Kravtsov selects his helpers, how he builds his inner circle.
How so?
He explicitly states he picks them from the very lowest level.
Why from the lowest level?
So that, in his words, you owe everything to me. He makes the dependency absolute, the bond unbreakable. If I'm kicked out, you will be kicked out too. If I lose everything, so will you.
Total mutual dependence.
Exactly. This, he declares, is as old as the hills, a time-tested tactic used by all rulers throughout history to secure loyalty and control.
This brutal honesty about self-interest being the primary glue for loyalty. It's a profound insight into the GRU's internal dynamics. It's not about blind allegiance, is it?
No.
It's about creating this unbreakable bond of mutual self-preservation, where your individual advancement is just inextricably linked to the success and survival of your patron.
And Kravtsov lived it himself.
Yeah, he exemplifies this by citing his own loyalty to General Obaturov. He took me into his group when he was major and I was a lieutenant. Not a very successful one. He's passing down this system where personal advancement is completely tied to a ruthless, hierarchical patronage.
And what about questioning the system or digging too deep?
Well, for those who might dare or who might delve too deeply into the GRU's inner workings, Kravtsov has this chilling, almost poetic warning. It's about the ultimate secret of the Aquarium, which he implies is hidden on the back of some seemingly innocuous portrait.
What's the warning?
He says, you only have to ask that question to find yourself hanging on a hook, by the neck or by the ribs and upside down.
Good God.
Yeah. This utterly pragmatic survival of the fittest worldview sets the entire moral and psychological framework for the GRU machine. It emphasizes brutal pragmatism, absolute hierarchy, and the complete suppression of conventional morality at every single turn.
So if that's the grim philosophy, what does it look like in practice? Suvorov's intensive training with Spetsnaz forces the Soviet Union's elite special forces gives us a truly brutal answer.
Yeah, the Spetsnaz training sections are intense.
He describes it as a crucible specifically designed to prepare them to kill skillfully, calmly, and with relish.
With relish? That's the word he uses. The ultimate overarching goal of this training was to strip away all conventional human fear. Not to fear heights, the sight of blood, high speeds, and above all, death. And the training details Suvorov provides are, whether beyond extreme, designed to break the human spirit and rebuild it into a weapon.
Like the parachute jumps.
Exactly. He recounts parachute jumps from a mere 100 meters, which is unnervingly low, gives you very little time for correction or escape. He calls it, quite emphatically, mankind had devised nothing worse than this.
100 meters. Wow. And the physical demand.
Equally brutal. A cruel pace, covering an astonishing 67 kilometers in a single day with only 2 brief breaks.
67 kilometer.
In a day. They were constantly on the move like night birds, or even prostitutes, as he describes them, relentlessly active, seeking, with no real rest, even lying in snow with their legs propped up to aid circulation after endless movement. This was designed to push the body to its absolute breaking point and reshape the mind to endure anything.
And survival skills. They had to be self-sufficient, I assume.
Absolutely. Help wasn't coming. So they were taught to forage and eat anything,
Sure.
including berries, mushrooms, hedgehogs, frogs, snakes, snails, and earthworms, even birch bark and acorns, if absolutely necessary.
Hedgehogs and earthworms.
Grim stuff. Their gear was meticulously designed for extreme conditions, too. Special matches that could light in any weather, dry spirit tablets for flameless cooking to avoid detection, and 2 pairs of thick wool socks crucial for any climate.
Even the underwear was specialized.
Yeah, thin linen combined with a thick string vest for ventilation and mosquito protection, designed to prevent chafing, disease on long missions. Plus, an anorak, this versatile piece of outer gear that could convert into a long skirt for warmth without overheating during long marches.
The level of detail is incredible. It reflects this absolute necessity for self-sufficiency, stealth, survival in hostile environments.
Definitely. And their weapons were equally specialized for covert ops. A Kalashnikov AKMS with a silencer and night sight for silent, unseen attacks, a compact P8 silenced pistol for close quarters, and a huge, versatile knife for cutting parachute lines with a powerful, spring-loaded blade that could carry up to 25 meters of rope.
He even mentions a spoon.
Yeah, a seemingly innocuous training purposes only spoon with a hole in it. A subtle trick, an old army deception to test if recruits were sharp enough to spot it.
Clever.
But beyond the physical training and the gear, the real core of this crucible was the psychological conditioning. What profound changes did all this mean for the human behind the uniform? For their very sense of self, their morality?
The psychological conditioning, as you said, is perhaps the most disturbing and revelatory part. Suvorov describes the concept of a blissful death, disposable syringe, carried for wartime.
Blissful death.
Yeah, indicating the chilling reality that the only way we have of surviving is to kill off our wounded ourselves.
Not about compassion, then.
No, it was about ruthlessly prioritizing the mission over human life, even their own comrades. And then, most shockingly, there were the puppets.
The puppets. These weren't metaphors.
No, they were real people. Tough, hardened criminals, often violent offenders, used for brutally realistic no-rules training fights against the Spetsnaz recruits.
Wait, they fought actual criminals.
That's what he says. Soldiers were told to hit him to your heart's content, but you mustn't break any bones, indicating some deliberate restraint, but the intensity was absolute. Suvorov emphasizes, this is not a phony fight. It's a real fight, involving a real risk.
My God. What was the purpose of that?
This horrific practice was designed to utterly desensitize them to violence, to turn them into unfeeling killers, cultivating aggression, eliminating any emotional barriers to taking a life.
Just brutal conditioning.
Totally. He recounts the incredible story of the Whip, a soldier so tough and resilient he escaped capture during an exercise by swimming through treacherous ice chunks. He returned to barracks 4 days later wearing a stolen policeman's greatcoat, a testament to the sheer animalistic drive for survival they wanted to instill.
Like Pavlov dogs, as he says. Conditioning them against fear, reinforcing a brutal instinct for survival at any cost. This section just reveals the sheer, unvarnished brutality of Spetsnaz training, designed to strip away conventional morality, humanity itself, and forge utterly ruthless operatives.
After all that brutal physical and psychological conditioning, it's really no surprise that deception was not just a tactic for them, but an absolute way of life, deeply woven into the very fabric of GRU operation.
It was fundamental.
Suvorov notes they maintain their secrets not just through violence by destroying anyone capable of talking too much, but also by the total concealment of a colossal quantity of factual information.
And through systems.
Yeah. Furthermore, he explains, it was achieved by a special system of personnel selection, a system of special passes, and a system of vertical and horizontal barriers to prevent access to secrets. They even developed a special language or jargon to further obscure their true nature.
This constant pervasive emphasis on deception, even at the lowest levels of training and daily operation, it must have profoundly infiltrated the very psychology of the operative.
How so?
Well, it wasn't just about what they did. It was about how they thought and how they perceived the world. Consider their camouflage, for instance. The reconnaissance battalion was expertly disguised as communications troops, operating with seemingly innocuous vehicles like closed vans.
So even other military units were fooled.
Absolutely. Most within the broader military regiment believed it was just a signals regiment with a secret branch handling governmental traffic. Even within the Spetsnaz battalion itself, many believed there were only 3 parachute companies, completely unaware of the existence of the ultra-secret special platoon of elite professionals operating covertly alongside them.
It's like a nested doll of deception, layers upon layers, making it almost impossible to know the true structure.
Exactly. And the details of this deception went even deeper, almost absurdly meticulous.
It's like the boots.
Yeah, they used Spetsnaz boots copied directly from those worn by probable enemies. American, French, Spanish, specifically to leave misleading tracks if they were ever detected in the field.
That's cunning.
But the ultimate, most cunning deception was one boot designed with the heel at the front and the sole behind, making footprints point the opposite direction of travel. A truly mind-bending trick.
Wow. Reverse footprints.
Yeah. And like wolves in a pack, they were trained to walk in each other's footprints to further obscure their numbers, make it impossible to track how many agents were actually present.
It's a remarkable level of psychological manipulation and operational security, a profound understanding of human perception and misdirection.
They weren't just trained in physical combat. They were trained in the art of the lie. They were even actively encouraged to read detective stories. No, not for entertainment, but to develop a criminal approach and a critical attitude to other people's deeds and decisions, fostering a mindset geared toward identifying weaknesses and exploiting them,
Training them to think like criminals.
essentially. Suvorov recounts a fascinating visit to a secret section of the Crime Museum in Moscow, reinforcing this criminal, exploitative mindset. He shares an anecdote about a counterfeit money machine that, paradoxically, only dispensed real money.
Real money. Why?
It was a swindle within a swindle, designed as bait to trap those trying to engage in illicit activities. A truly insidious trap.
So this raises a critical question, doesn't it? If your identity is constantly masked, if your every action is geared towards misdirection, if you're explicitly trained to adopt a criminal approach, how does that affect your fundamental sense of self?
Does it erode your own internal truth? Turn you into a ghost? These methods demonstrate a profound, almost terrifying understanding of psychological manipulation and operational security, making the GRU a truly formidable and deeply unsettling opponent.
After undergoing such intense conditioning and indoctrination, Suvorov describes his supposed transfer. He was supposedly going to the 10th Chief Directorate as a military advisor.
Right, a seemingly conventional cover, postings in places like Vietnam, Algeria, Cuba.
But this, he reveals, was merely a meticulously crafted illusion, an elaborate smokescreen designed to conceal his true entry into the GRU's most secret academy, the heart of the Aquarium.
And this is where the psychological gauntlet truly irreversibly begins. The GRU examinations weren't just a single test.
No, it was a week-long, relentless ordeal.
What did it involve?
Rapid-fire questions on an impossibly diverse range of topics: advanced math, obscure history, cutting-edge military tech, current affairs, even personal preferences. No aspect of their intellect or personality was left unprobed.
Constant scrutiny.
Totally. There were the piercing eyes of the examiner, constantly assessing every reaction, intentional trick questions with wrong answers even pre-written faintly on the table to tempt and trap the unwary.
And deprivation.
Yeah, candidates were subjected to deliberate food and water deprivation for days, pushing them to the brink. Even simple requests, like going to the toilet, were approved or denied seemingly at random, purely to test their resilience, their patience, their capacity to endure a total loss of control.
It sounds less like an examination and more like a systematic psychological breakdown, designed to strip away all autonomy.
Exactly. And then the chilling, unforgettable crematorium reminder.
Back to the chimney.
Yes. A gray-haired, stoic man delivers the grim, unequivocal warning: there's only one way out of our organization. That is through the chimney of the crematorium. And to ensure this message resonated with primal fear,
The film.
they were shown that horrifying film, allegedly depicting a defector being cremated alive, a direct, undeniable, deeply unsettling threat that leaves absolutely no room for misinterpretation.
It's a moment designed to strip away any lingering illusions of choice or escape, to implant the absolute finality of their commitment.
And Suvorov's reaction.
Well, he describes a sleepless night agonizing over this revelation, pondering why the defector in the film hadn't simply tried to escape, to run. His own defiant act in response is fascinating.
What did he do?
He made rude gestures and exposed himself to what he believed were hidden cameras, fully expecting to be immediately sent to Siberia for such blatant insubordination.
But that's not what happened.
Astonishingly, no, he wasn't punished. Instead, he's accepted into the nomenclatura of the Central Committee.
What does nomenclatura mean in this context?
It's crucial. It meant he was now part of the Soviet elite, a privileged class with significant influence and, critically, immunity from the KGB's internal investigations.
So his defiance was rewarded.
It suggests the GRU wasn't looking for compliant sheep, perhaps, but for individuals who possess this unique blend of defiance, initiative, and an almost reckless adaptability, qualities they could twist to their own ends.
Interesting. His initial training after acceptance involved living in a dacha.
A luxurious country cottage, usually reserved for top Soviet comrades.
But these weren't just perks, right? They served purpose.
Exactly. They served as controlled environments. Here, 23 middle-level intelligence officers, pilots, missile forces experts, doctors, lawyers were gathered. ostensibly being tested for potential friendship and trust, drinking only in moderation to maintain composure.
A controlled observation period.
Pretty much. It was during this period that he's introduced to Colonel Peter Fyodorovich Razumov, ominously nicknamed Elephant, a man who had served an astonishing 23 years in the Aquarium.
23 years.
Yeah. And Elephant delivers another stark truth. They can rely only on his own head, his own intelligence. He concludes with a chilling pronouncement that would define their future. There is no safety belt.
No safety belt.
This segment reveals the intense psychological screening and the lifelong, utterly inescapable commitment demanded by the GRU. Entry isn't a career choice. It's a profound, irreversible absorption into a system that claims your entire being.
The initial training at the dacha, it wasn't just about spycraft then.
No, it was about deep-seated psychological profiling, identifying those who could be fully absorbed into the system, and maybe more importantly, those who might break under the pressure of having no safety belt. It reinforces the absolute idea that once you're in, your existence is completely redefined by the organization. Every personal tie, every moral consideration, just subsumed by the GRU's needs. Your old self is gone. A new, utterly loyal operative emerges.
Once truly inside, Suvorov's work in the GRU's 90th Directorate in Vienna pulls back the curtain on the vast, often surprisingly mundane reality of intelligence gathering.
Not all glamour and action.
Not according to him. He notes that the navigator, Major General Golitsyn, the head of the GRU's diplomatic residency, frequently uses new recruits like Suvorov as mere backup for other people, assigning them difficult, dangerous, and thankless jobs, while others higher up the chain get the medals and the glory.
Sounds like paying your dues in a very harsh system. And what's truly fascinating here is the pervasive role of diplomatic immunity, not as a privilege, but as a systematic cover for overt intelligence operations.
How did that work?
A truly enormous volume of diplomatic mail containers weighing up to 100 kilograms each would regularly pass through Vienna, which was a key European transit point.
And these weren't just letters.
Oh no. These weren't just innocuous documents. They often contained highly sensitive intelligence, raw materials, maybe even equipment. Armed couriers and a Soviet diplomat were always present to protect them, leveraging international conventions and, implicitly, the threat of military force to ensure their passage.
And he mentions Khrushchev's books.
Yeah, the ingenious Khrushchev books anecdote. They utilize the embassy's attic, which is conveniently full of undelivered Khrushchev speeches, official, but forgotten propaganda. These seemingly useless volumes were hollowed out and used to transport intelligence.
Wow, hiding in plain sight.
It shows how even the most mundane, overlooked items became tools of espionage. It's a real testament to their ruthless ingenuity in bending or outright breaking the rules of diplomatic conduct.
So much for glamorous spies extracting secrets from beautiful foreign agents. Much of the top-secret information, Suvorov explains, wasn't derived from high-profile super spies at all.
No, it came from something far more methodical and painstaking. Activity charts.
Activity charts, what are those?
This meant the meticulous, relentless monitoring and deciphering of enemy radio and radar stations. He notes, every station had its own character, its own handwriting, a unique pattern of transmission.
So they could predict things.
Exactly. It allowed them to forecast enemy movements, operational rhythms, even intentions, based on these subtle, almost invisible patterns in their transmissions.
That really reshapes our understanding of intelligence. It's often portrayed as cloak and dagger.
Right, but much of it, as Suvorov reveals, was painstaking, highly analytical work, almost an early form of what we now call big data analysis, long before computers made it common.
So they could build predictive models of enemy behavior, understand their rhythms.
Almost as intimately as their own. This shifted intelligence from reactive catching spies to proactive forecasting threats. A subtle but profound strategic advantage.
And during this period, he meets a new deputy.
Yes, he's introduced to Colonel Marchuk, Kravtsov's new deputy, who is, surprisingly, a medical officer.
A doctor. Interesting.
And Marchuk conducts what Suvorov calls the poodle test, subtly testing his willingness to eat frogs and snakes, common survival fare in the field.
Back to the frogs and snicks.
Yeah. Marchuk, with a grim humor, apparently reassures him, not going to make you eat frogs. Snakes, perhaps, but not frogs. This reinforces the ongoing, pervasive psychological conditioning. To overcome natural revulsion, desensitize them to the abnormal, the unpleasant, make them adaptable to any grotesque situation.
And even in this world of pure pragmatism, scientific monitoring, brutal conditioning, Suvorov has this fascinating internal struggle, a surprising moment of deep human vulnerability.
What was that about?
He describes his feelings about the Orthodox Church situated within the embassy grounds, a beacon of faith in a world seemingly devoid of it.
What does he say?
He says, "I know full well that there is no God, but it disturbs me. There is something mystical and magical about it. I feel I could end up on my knees before this mysterious, beckoning beauty and stay there forever."
Wow. That's a surprising, almost jarring moment of introspection, isn't
Yeah.
it? Even in this environment, meticulously designed to strip away all conventional morality, all personal belief, all human sentiment.
Thing lingered.
The lingering human need for something more, for beauty, for meaning beyond pure utility, for something that transcends their brutal reality, it persists. It highlights the profound personal cost of living in a world completely devoid of conventional morality.
Yeah.
This whole section illuminates the vast scope of GRU operations, from the subtle analytical work to the audacious diplomatic deception, all hidden behind layers of officialdom and psychological conditioning, and the sometimes surprising, deeply human reactions of those forced to exist within it.
So with all that preparation, what do these GRU agents actually do in the field? Suvorov gives us a first-hand look at the deception game in action, starting with recruitment.
Right, the practical application.
He describes an international trade show, like the Geneva exhibition, not as a place for commerce, but as a battlefield for the GRU.
A battlefield.
Yeah, and a club for fanatics, where a fanatic needs an audience. GRU agents, he explains, never go to work on the first day of these events. Too crowded with officials, police.
So they wait.
They strategically use the second day to make initial contacts. When the crowds are thinner, authorities may be less vigilant.
This is a masterclass in exploiting fundamental human nature, isn't it? A cold, calculated dissection of vulnerability.
How so?
Well, they target individuals who are passionate, even obsessive, about their specialized fields. Knowing these fanatics are often more susceptible to flattery, attention, the promise of validation. It's not about grand conspiracies, it's about understanding deep human psychology and leveraging it.
And he gives a specific example.
Yes, what's particularly fascinating here is his meticulous account of recruiting an engineer for the RS-77 apparatus. A highly advanced piece of technology valued at a staggering $120,000. Something that would take the Soviets many years and cost us millions to develop from scratch.
How did they frame the offer? It wasn't just sell us secrets.
No, the recruitment offer was framed in this ingenious, seemingly legitimate way. Not as payment for stolen secrets, but as purchasing a book about submarines for $17,000 for each copy. A book, they claimed, of which only 43 copies had ever been published.
Classic money laundering technique. Paying for a book rather than stolen intel, creating a paper trail of legitimacy.
Exactly. But Suvorov, despite his conditioning, admits to this profound, lingering discomfort with the operation.
Really? Why?
He says, "I didn't like that at all. I was working in this field because I had no choice, but this fellow was rushing, of his own free will, to help us." This stark contrast, his forced complicity versus the engineer's eager collaboration, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
About the impact on the agents themselves.
Yeah. Does the GRU's willingness to ruthlessly exploit human greed and self-interest make them more effective in the short term? Or does it ultimately corrupt their own operatives, eroding any internal moral compass they might have left?
It certainly highlights the profound moral ambiguity right at the heart of their operations. And immediate concealment of recruitment was paramount, wasn't it? A critical step to ensure the agents' ongoing utility and their own security.
Absolutely crucial.
Suvorov's personal method after a successful recruitment was to immediately visit 100 stands at the exhibition, just blurring his movements, making it virtually impossible for any surveillance to pinpoint exactly who had said yes.
Creating noise in the data.
Right. The newly recruited agent would then be moved a long way from the exhibition, Montreux, then Austria, Finland, even the USA, to minimize any immediate follow-up or detection.
And Suvorov himself had techniques.
Oh yeah, he describes his personal evasion techniques. Vanishing into bustling department stores, navigating complex underground garages, deftly squeezing into elevators at the last second, even being transported in the sealed boot of a diplomatic car to escape detection.
These methods underscore the pervasive paranoia and meticulous, almost obsessive planning that define GRU operations. Every single detail considered to maintain absolute operational security and deniability.
But then we get to the Vovka Fomichev operation, which is where it gets really interesting, maybe disturbing, demonstrating the GRU's willingness to exploit interpersonal relationships in the most brutal way.
What happened there?
This was described as an elementary provocation designed purely to test Fomichev, an assistant military attaché. Suvorov himself plants a Bible in Fomichev's letterbox.
A Bible. Why?
A seemingly innocuous act, but designed to uncover disloyalty. Fomichev's fatal failure was not reporting this suspicious item to his chief. That immediately marked him as a danger to our organization, a potential weak link.
So failure to report was enough?
Apparently.
Yeah.
His evacuation, a chillingly polite term for his arrest, occurs during a Sunday film viewing at the embassy. Public, yet controlled.
And Suvorov's role?
He plays a direct, deeply disturbing role in deceiving Fomichev's very special wife, Valya, about her husband's sudden, urgent job that took him away. Fomichev, already on the conveyor, their term for being under intense interrogation, is even manipulated into spying on his own wife.
Spying on his own wife? That's monstrous.
A complete degradation of personal trust. He's then given a bliss injection, a powerful sedative, before his flight back to Moscow. A truly chilling contrast to the blissful death syringe carried by Spetsnaz, revealing this spectrum of chemical control they used.
Truly ruthless. A complete exploitation of even the most intimate personal relationships, turning a husband against his wife.
And it wasn't always about high-value targets or dramatic betrayals either. Suvorov also describes the humdrum job of depositing an RPG-7 grenade launcher weighing over 20 kilograms in a remote mountain dead drop.
Just leaving weapons cache.
Yeah, a hidden cache for future use. He disguises himself as a tourist for this task, even using cigar tobacco to throw off any potential tracking dogs. His dark fantasy, recounted internally, of revolutionaries eventually finding and using it to kidnap officials and torture them for secrets. It chillingly illustrates the brutal mindset that was now ingrained within him.
And that brutal mindset directly led to Suvorov's original chilling idea for what he called alpine tourism, which ultimately morphed into a mass roundup strategy for the GRU.
What was the initial idea?
Deceptively simple. Buy bankrupt mountain hotels in Austria to study American Sixth Fleet officers on leave. Observe their habits, then conduct lightning recruitment elsewhere, in more secure locations, maybe after compromising them.
But it evolved
Into something far more insidious, a mass recruitment, almost an entrapment strategy, described as dozens of spies against one victim.
Dozens against one.
Yeah. In this scenario, the isolated victim is systematically pressured to collaborate or face dire consequences, often suicide, designed to look like an accident. Suvorov chillingly notes, "Our boys can sometimes dress themselves up in police uniform, hinting at illegal detentions or forced collaboration. The ultimate goal is to drive the target into a corner, to break them completely, even creating a naked man in the corner stripped of all dignity and agency."
Wow.
This segment vividly portrays the cunning, ruthless efficiency and sheer scale of GRU operations, where human lives are mere pawns in a grand game, and even the most personal relationships are ruthlessly exploited for strategic gain, revealing the raw truth of their amorality. So in this world of constant deception, psychological manipulation, ruthless operations, what was the internal environment like for the spies themselves? You mentioned Kravtsov's patronage system.
Right, and Suvorov describes a fierce competition within the GRU overall, a brutal meritocracy where only the fastest survived.
Active versus passive. Exactly. There's a stark dynamic between active and passive officers. The successful active ones are meticulously protected by two squadrons covering their tail, meaning they have layers of support and deniability.
And the passive ones.
They're ruthlessly sacrificed, burned, or simply allowed to fade out into obscurity and disgrace if they fail to produce results.
It must have fostered an incredibly high-pressure, cutthroat environment.
Absolutely. Where every action was scrutinized and every failure, no matter how minor, had severe, often career-ending consequences. We see this brutal dynamic play out vividly in the shifting fortunes of the navigator, Major General Gauntlet, and his first deputy, Nikolai Tarasovich Moroz.
What happened with Moroz?
Moroz's dramatic fall from grace is attributed to a major disaster, an implied failure to protect a priceless source, a catastrophic security breach. It led to his complete demotion. He becomes nobody, reduced to drinking heavily.
The pressure takes its toll.
Immensely. What's profoundly fascinating here is the psychological toll it takes, even on senior, hardened officers. The navigator himself, despite his position of power, is said to be drinking secretly in front of a mirror, not wanting to admit to solitary drinking, revealing a hidden vulnerability, a mirror to Moroz's own struggles.
It paints a stark picture of a system that, for all its grand ambitions, often just devours its own, leaving behind this trail of broken individuals.
But Moreau's, against all odds, eventually regains his firm hand and is reappointed as first deputy.
So there's a chance for redemption?
Occasionally, it seems like a cyclical process of brutal assessment, a fall from grace, and sometimes a chance of redemption if you can prove your worth and effectiveness once more.
And Moreau's gives Suvorov advice.
Yes, and even when he's at his lowest point, Moreau's offers this telling, almost paradoxical advice to Suvorov while inebriated. Our crowd at the moment are in a state of complete collapse. Get working right away, Victor. Tomorrow it may be too late.
Is that mentorship or a warning?
That's the question, isn't it? Is this a form of perverse mentorship, a warning born of harsh experience? Moreau's, in his state of vulnerability, warns Suvorov not to tell him his ideas, explicitly stating, "I might steal your idea. I need good ideas now," very badly.
Wow. Brutal honesty again. Self-preservation above all.
It reveals the intense internal rivalry that exists even among supposed allies.
And Suvorov's alpine tourism idea? That helps him.
Yes, it ultimately becomes his ticket to breaking free from mere backup work, leading to a significant, undeniable ascent within the GRU hierarchy. The first cipher clerk, a lieutenant colonel, a man previously a senior, starts addressing him formally as Viktor Andreevich.
A sign of respect.
A huge sign, a highly formal, respectful address that visibly makes the jaw drop of other officers, a clear, unmistakable signal of his rapidly rising status. The navigator himself, the head of the residency, even personally greets him with champagne.
So his ruthless idea paid off within that ruthless system.
Exactly. This entire narrative arc highlights the constant, relentless jockeying for position and the brutal, unforgiving consequences of failure within the GRU, where even presumed allies are, at their core, potential rivals in a desperate struggle for survival and advancement.
So we've witnessed the relentless external pressures and the profound moral compromises inherent in this world. But what about the spy's inner world? His soul, his internal battles.
Yeah, Suvorov offers some really fascinating, deeply dark observations about the nature of cruelty itself.
Like the pigeon analogy.
Exactly. A pigeon is a revolting bird, he says. Neither hawks, nor wolves, nor crocodiles kill for amusement. But pigeons do just that. They kill their kind simply for fun.
Killing for fun.
He contrasts this with the very peaceful creature, the anaconda, which kills only for food. He wishes he had a Kalashnikov to spray the pigeon with bullets, despite knowing he'd be saving another murderer.
That's a disturbing reflection. What does it tell us?
Well, it truly makes you consider who, in this world he describes, truly embodies the animal nature he was taught about. Is it the humans who act with calculated, casual cruelty, like the pigeons? Or the animals who kill only out of necessity, like the anaconda?
It's a chilling moment of profound introspection, revealing his own internal struggle with the very philosophy he was taught to embrace. He recognizes the inherent pointless cruelty in the pigeon's actions, a mirror, perhaps, to the arbitrary cruelty he's witnessed or participated in.
He sees it more clearly, perhaps, than those who just follow the doctrine without question.
And then there's that powerful, almost redemptive moment in an Austrian pub.
With the stranger.
Yeah, where a large, friendly Austrian man approaches him, unexpectedly, squeezing his shoulder with a warm and friendly hand, offering what Suvorov recognizes as genuine human sympathy.
And Suvorov's internal reaction.
Profound and raw. A good man. A better man than I was. 100 times better. This stands in stark, heartbreaking contrast to the dehumanizing world he inhabits. It offers this fleeting glimpse of genuine human connection he seemingly craves, but can no longer fully participate in or reciprocate.
A moment of clarity. But quickly overshadowed, right? By his own inescapable foreboding fate.
Yeah. Suvorov's recurring dreams are this constant battleground, a clash of his trained mind and his yearning for escape.
What does he dream about?
Vast attacking operations, deep penetration by tanks, Spetsnaz brigades in the enemy's rear, the stuff he was trained for. Yet interwoven with these dreams of conquest, he also dreams of flying, desperately trying to escape. Away from Krapsov, away from Spetsnaz, away from the tough fighting.
A profound internal conflict.
Absolutely. He feels his mother country is very sick, but I couldn't make out what it was suffering from. Sheer madness, perhaps, or schizophrenia. He doesn't know who somebody had to be killed to help. A lingering, disturbing echo of his training.
His gnawing schizophrenia of the soul. It truly reveals the profound personal cost of living a life of constant deception and ruthlessness. His final acceptance, his resignation, it's not just chilling, it's heartbreakingly honest.
He knew joining was a mistake.
He says he knew, even as he was accepted, that if I were accepted into the Aquarium, it would be a big mistake on the part of the Soviet intelligence. He understands with stark clarity that his departure would not be an honorable one.
How does he see his end?
He asserts with this grim certainty, I will not die in my bed. No, people like me do not die in their beds. It would really have been better for Soviet intelligence if it had dispatched me through the chimney right away.
Wow. Believing he should have been killed from the start.
Yeah. His final bleak thought is this apocalyptic vision of a future concentration camp. Perhaps one he might run or be an inmate of, where volunteers will eat each other like rats in an iron barrel.
Just utterly bleak.
This section takes you deep into the spy's tortured psyche, revealing the profound personal cost of living in a world completely devoid of conventional morality and filled with relentless, self-eroding deception. The chilling truth for us, the listeners, is how systems designed for absolute control can distort individuals to such an extreme, pushing them beyond the very boundaries of humanity.
We've taken an extraordinary journey today, haven't we? Delving deep into Victor Suvorov's world. A world where the only way out, quite literally, was through the chimney of a crematorium.
Yeah.
We've systematically explored the depths of the GRU's secrecy, the sheer extremes of its physical and psychological training, and the chilling, brutal philosophy that underpin Soviet military intelligence at its core.
This deep dive into the Aquarium really offers a stark, unfiltered look at the human cost of absolute power, the relentless psychological conditioning required to create operatives like Suvorov, and the profoundly distorted lens through which a spy like him is forced to view the world.
It's a world where loyalty is built on mutual self-interest and profound fear.
Where deception isn't just a tactic, but a fundamental way of being. And where even basic human empathy is ruthlessly purged as a weakness to be overcome.
And as you reflect on Suvorov's grim observations, particularly his belief that we are all animals capable of extreme cruelty under pressure, even comparing humans to pigeons killing for amusement, ask yourself this. What kind of society does it truly take to suppress or perhaps unleash those primal instincts within us? And what profound price do we collectively pay for that complex dance between control and chaos? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.